Oh,
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found to the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview and ask, What's my thesis? And today, my guest, actually, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name. I'm going to give it a go. Is it Briccetti?
that works. The last one right there.
Okay, so it's been a while. So apparently, the two C's with an E after it are a hard sound.
I speak no Italian despite my
Really?
extreme Italian last name. So this is based on conjecture. There are certainly divides in the family based on how they pronounce it. I grew up in Missouri, so we used to say Briccetti. So,
In
don't,
Missouri?
don't take
Oh,
my
is that
word
how you
for it.
know Zebra Zorb?
Well, it's not how I know Zebrazor, but when we were both, doing art stuff in LA, there are so few folks from Missouri that, like, as soon as I met one, we had an immediate, subliminal connection. I think Missouri has a lot of problems and a lot of people would say many mean things about it. And so I think that if you're from there, you sort of like have to represent it a little bit and seek out other people who are cool that are from there.
Well, that sounds an awful lot like Florida.
And lo and behold, now I've ended up in Florida. I am a recent California expat. I've taken a 2-year visiting faculty appointment at the University of Florida, home of gators and Gatorade, and a lot of humidity and some incredible spiders and
Can you
insects.
show me any mosquito bites yet?
Oh my gosh, you don't even want to see. I think
Ah,
I went out to a brewery, and I don't know if you can even see
it's the
my
ankles.
foot.
I knew it
It's
was going to
just
be the ankles.
covered in fire ant bites or something. It's a mess. It's a
Yeah,
mess.
sometimes I would go into like my grandmother's garden and all of a sudden I would just have this like feeling here. I don't know what it was, but I swear it was like some kind of bite that would happen that I just would like be in the garden. It was like a crazy space full of like all these plants. And then she would have me, I talked to her recently. She's getting up in years. And I joked with her about how terrible I was at watering her plants. And she thought that was hilarious because it's very true.
And so, what part of Florida are you from? Are you from South Florida?
Yeah, I'm a SoFla all the way. I
Okay.
305 repper,
Okay.
and it's have you ever read any Carl Hyacin?
I have not, no.
Okay, it's a very fucking weird place, but you're gonna have some very interesting experiences that I can't wait to round back and check in on with you because it is like it's just a weird fucking place where weird shit happens. You're gonna be living. You said Gainesville.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's
Yeah,
its own thing.
it is. It's North Central Florida, which is a pretty rural place, and
Mm.
it sort of is like a college town. So it's a lot more. You have the influence of the university. It's a very different population from the surrounding population,
Hmm.
many people know with college towns. But I part of the reason that I was interested in this job, one, it was a job that was teaching painting in the expanded field, which is kind of an unusual, gig to get. That was right up
What
my
does that
alley.
mean? What's painting in the expanded field?
So basically, if we think about like the field of painting, what's happening next? How are we pushing the edges of that field? How are we
Mm.
expanding what it means to be a painter? The expanded field as a concept is sort of based off of a Rosalind Krauss essay about sculpture, where she kind of graphs out, what does sculpture mean in,
Hmm.
a contemporary sense. So that was really fun and exciting for me because my work deals a lot with digital culture. I work in a variety of different media, but my work is also very collage based. And Florida is a collage, it's like just this weird where I am, we have a university, we have rednecks, we have a huge Cuban population, we have, there's all these folks from New York who come down to Florida. The nature is just crazy. It's a weird,
The nature
weird
will get you.
It's nuts. It's especially after being in California for 10 years, like things just grow like crazy.
And the idea of, I don't know, man. You can definitely like. I remember I took a bike ride through this place called Nature Valley. It's not actually a valley. It's just, sorry, it's not Nature Valley. That's the granola bar.
Granola bar.
It's called Shark Valley.
Covers you in granola confetti. Yeah. Much
so it's in the Everglades. It's just basically a trail that goes out. And we went riding, and we didn't realize that when it got dark, it was going to be fucking pitch black because we were like, and on the way out, there were gators just on the path. So we were like riding our bikes around them, but like literally covering parts of the path where we only had like a little edge to go through. And then on the way back, we couldn't see shit. And so it was like fucking terrifying. But
dinosaurs. Yeah. They are dinosaurs.
Oh yeah.
They just are hanging out. I saw one outside my office yesterday, a little guy, but still it was like, oh, all right. There's dinosaurs where I work.
Yeah. So yeah, because we were also talking about Florida. I don't want to get off into too many different tangents, but we were talking a little bit about football teams and how like you're officially a Gator now, which Tim Tebow's part of your legacy.
Oh, wonderful!
Congratulations. And Steve Spurrier, but I don't know. Like when I was a kid, the Miami Hurricanes were a huge team. And they've never recovered. They were like champions and shit like that. I've never heard of them becoming anywhere near what they were. They had this like rape scandal where like the whole fucking team, it was just this crazy fucking thing. So like that's kind of like Miami's such a party town that like I don't know, it's just like a super rapey vibe. In certain parts of it. I don't know if like the Gators have that kind of reputation, but that's kind of like what Florida football is like huge, but that's like Florida football legacy to me that doesn't ever get discussed. It's like whatever happened to the Miami Hurricanes?
Huh. That's University of Miami, or is that like a professional team? I know nothing about football, obviously.
And before that scandal broke, U2 and Public Enemy did a concert together. And Flava Flav came out in like a Miami Hurricanes helmet. So it was just like,
oh, wow.
It was like, I mean, obviously he was pandering to the crowd, but it was like a big part of the culture. So anyway, what kind of stuff did you guys get up to in Missouri? Because I can tell you about Florida, but I don't know anything about Missouri.
What did we get up to in Missouri?
You're not from St. Louis? What part of Missouri?
I am. I'm sort of from the outskirts of St. Louis, right on the edge of like the country and the suburbs. Eureka is where I went to high school. It's probably more suburban now. We did not get up to a whole lot out there. One thing about, it's funny because coming here and it's, in Florida so hot and humid, I've met a few other people from Missouri and they're all like, oh, you'll be fine. Because honestly, Missouri has Florida summers and Chicago winters. So it's pretty brutal. You get the worst of both worlds. So
I still can't fully place it on a map, which is not a dig. It's just sort of like where my American geography is. But so, and then you were there just for high school? Like where did you went to school out in California? How did you end up in California?
No, I grew up mostly in Missouri. We moved there when I was in elementary school, lived there for a long time. I went to college there. And then after I finished my undergrad, moved to New York for a few years, and my then boyfriend got an offer to get his PhD on the West Coast. And I was cold in my tiny, dark apartment. And I was like, oh my God, please, let's go anywhere. So we moved out to Santa Barbara. And
Oh,
we broke
wow.
up
That's an
almost
upgrade.
immediately. We broke up immediately when we got out there because it was like, oh wait, I wasn't miserable because of New York. Like this was the thing, you know.
Oh, really?
Um,
So you could have stayed in New York and been happy, you think? Or
no. I'm glad
okay,
I left. I'm glad
half
I
and
left.
half,
It was
we'll
good.
call it.
Yes. So I came out to California, immediately broke up with the dude I followed out there, and then was like, all right, I need to like get a job and find an apartment and create a life out here. So I
Yeah.
did. I ended up getting a job at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and was there for a while designing natural history exhibits, which was a really weird, interesting, fun,
So you were
crazy.
doing like life-size diorama stuff?
Working on dioramas, doing some graphics, also doing planning and conceptualization for different exhibitions. But yeah, there were certainly days where, you know, I was climbing behind the glass and pulling out dead mice or whatever was happening back there. It was a very weird
Wait,
job.
so like mice were just dying there or they were part of a display?
Well, so natural history specimens. I mean, it's just the skin of an animal. So pests
Okay.
are a huge problem. So you're getting bugs, mice, all sorts of stuff. This was a very old historic museum, and there were areas where the floor wasn't really a floor. It just kind of opened up to the ground underneath, which was a conservation nightmare. So I remember at one point we went into an exhibit, and of course you get that blindness when you see something every day. You don't even notice how bad it's gotten. We noticed that one of the specimens, the skin was completely gone. And I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of taxidermy, but it's just
Oh.
like a armature made out of wire and thread
Oh,
and
wow.
whatever. And so it was just it was just the armature of this rodent or whatever it had been. Yeah.
So
So
I never thought
back to
about like,
insects. We keep coming back to insects today.
are you an insect aficionado or is it just something that's happening?
Seems to just be following. It's not a path I chose. The insect life I didn't choose the insect life. The insect life chose me, I guess. I keep ending
But is
up
it
in
just in this
Florida or whatever.
conversation or have you noticed this before?
I've noticed this before.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will not be surprised if it comes up again then.
No, don't be shocked.
So do you want to get into your topic a little bit? I mean, I was gonna say that it's interesting because I never thought about like who buys taxidermy. I always just kind of dismiss it as this like weird thing, but it makes sense that natural history museums would keep taxidermists in business.
Yes, in California, it's natural history museums and Hollywood are really, keeping those places going.
Hollywood, in the sense that they have like them to decorate tacky apartments and
Yeah,
stuff.
for
Or?
decoration, or I think for special effects, if so you do a
Okay.
quick cut of like an animal or something. So we worked a lot with the taxidermist in LA who does a lot of work for Hollywood, and then of course hunters and things as well. But
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah, that's usually what I think of when I think of taxidermy. And then I
mhm.
also think of Ed Gein, but do you know who that is?
Yes, of course I know about Ed
Okay.
Gein.
uh, all right. So, did you want to get into your topic? What did you want to talk about today?
I did. So the thing that I have been thinking about is humor in art. I personally am pretty goofy and silly, and I see a lot of contemporary art, and I see the word humor applied to art quite often, but it's never done in a goofy or an overt way. It's always sort of done in this like subtle, kind of removed way. And as a goofy individual, that just makes me really sad. And so, it's something that's been on my mind that I've been thinking a lot about. And I certainly think that um, more overt or goofy, fun humor is a democratizing force in art.
Hmm.
Calling something that's marginally funny or just like two slightly unrelated images next to each other and being like, oh, this is hilarious. Like that's
Yeah.
such a it's such a way to exclude people from the experience.
Wait, so then what like are we talking about like slapstick? Like what do you mean? Define goofy. I mean, because there's like literally a character that we can envision,
Yeah,
Hoik! You know,
I
like,
don't
and I
necessarily
know that
mean
you
it to
use
be
like some
oversized job.
iconography, some pop culture iconography, right? You do stuff with
Yeah.
Batman and whatnot. So can you expand on the concept of goofy? What do you define as goofy, and like how do you want to see it in art, like, or how do you enjoy it in art?
That's a good question. I think humor that is overtly silly, things that are over the top, maybe humor that is like, it could be slapstick, it could be like a really dumb cartoon character.
Hmm.
It could be humor that is like yes anding itself up and up and up to get more and more absurd. I guess absurdity would be part of it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know if that clarifies.
Absurdity. All right. I think I can relate to that because I definitely am interested in some level of humor too. I do like resent a little bit of stuffiness in the art world, and there's a lot of preciousness that I think is cringe a lot of times. Uh, but yeah, so I don't know. I definitely absurdity is definitely something that I can relate to because I try to keep that in my arsenal in terms of like I feel like what I'm trying to relate is sort of how crazy things are that the way that we do them are that might maybe fall a little bit into the removed thing but that you were talking about, but I do sort of feel like you know I do feel like there was a period where I kind of felt like my stuff was getting a little too punchliney. Like I didn't actually
Hmm.
have to show people the work; I could just describe it to them, and then they would be like, "Oh, ha ha ha!" ha," you know.
Like
And I
what?
felt
Like,
like
can you give
in
me an
that
example of that?
yeah, like I mean I had or I had a printer that printed it into a shredder, so like that's very much you get it, but like to actually watch the paper go in, it's a different experience. So if something gets lost when it's that easy to sort of just like be like, but you know, and then and like I feel like I'm starting to go a little bit away from that, which is interesting that you're saying that because, like, I think that silliness is good, but it can also be, I don't know. Have you ever seen instances where it doesn't make you like where you're just completely turned off by the person's sense of humor?
I think, yeah, I think that maybe something that I'm dancing around a little bit is weirdness as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to just humor. Because I think humor, as you're kind of saying, can just be like a pretty straightforward 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
But I think that a more like complex and really weird humor, and maybe that's what I'm missing in a lot of contemporary art is people just getting extremely, extremely weird. And perhaps that has to do with market forces. Perhaps
You
that
don't
has to
feel
do
like
with
people
people.
get extremely weird with art?
I don't know. I
Really?
feel like I go out to shows and I see.
I'm thinking about a few performance art pieces that I've seen recently that I'm like, okay, this is definitely over the top. But it's interesting. Okay, I guess what I was kind of trying to touch upon is that like, written humor is either good or it's fucking awful, you know? And I feel like it's really easy to overdo it with art in general, right? Like but I'm trying to think of examples where I've just been like, oh, this isn't funny the way that the artist thinks of it. Maybe it's because there is an absence of it.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of examples of art that like someone would curate into a show about humor and art, and I would walk through the entire exhibition and not laugh once.
Yeah.
And you would be like, "Oh, okay, there's some humor here. That's funny. There's like a mustache on a banana on a blank canvas and just that,
Or a
like
banana
this
taped to the wall.
a banana taped to the wall, right? Which is like only, I don't know that that's laugh out loud humor. That's like, oh, this is kind of an absurd commentary on, these very insular issues of the art world.
Yeah.
And even, I'm curious about the weird performances that you saw, because I feel like I really am lacking a lot of weirdness. And maybe I'm thinking mostly, as a painter, about 2D work. But yeah,
Well,
I
I
want
feel
to.
like it is hard to sort of put humor into it. Like maybe it's not a lack of humor, but it is maybe like I think that a lot of it falls into the issue into like playful. You get what I'm saying? Like where I think that like for example, like I think of people that are, like for example, my first experience of like I went to the National Gallery and I saw a Calder exhibit when I was younger. I think it was like 18 at the time, and that was the first time that I had like really fun, right? But it wasn't funny, but it was fun to look at all these pieces. There was like a joyfulness, like I mean that's a weird word, but like like there was like something. I'm not even a fan of playful, but there was something that was fun and like the interaction with the work was enjoyable to me. That's something that I am interested in, but I'm trying to think of like, do you have any examples of artists that are just like humorous, or is it more of like, are you looking for more of a, heh, kind of laugh,
I mean,
or
I
is that the
think
laugh you don't like?
that's not, I don't like dislike that as much. I mean, I think about like some maybe a little bit older artists, Jim Shaw or Peter Saul, people that are just like so weird and hilarious and absurd.
But like,
In the
what kind of stuff do they do?
Peter Saul did paintings, sometimes political, that were I don't want to say cartoony, but sort of like just bizarrely overwrought. And Jim Shaw has done a little bit of everything, but sometimes does. He did this great installation at the Marciano Foundation before they, union busted and shut down, about it was a museum of all these absurd wigs that he'd created. And he had taken backdrops from the what is it, the Freemasons, who had been in that occupied that building before the Marciano Foundation came in, and made these like crazy bizarre hellscapes and scenes out of some of these backdrops. um
So for people that don't know, I mean, I just looked up Jim Shaw. For listeners that don't know, I see hot dogs graduating coming out of a meat grinder building. So it does feel. I was gonna say that like when I think of it, I do think of it. This kind of reminds me a little bit of who I had his daughter on, Skip Williamson, who was friends with who did the book, the Steal This Book. He did the cover art
oh
for
yeah.
that, and he did a lot. Like it was that like underground comic scene. That's kind of. I'm trying to think of like, is there gallery art that's funny? And the only examples that I can think of are just like dumb like dick jokes, like.
Yes, yes, exactly, like very flat. Humor is so, I feel like it's used to diffuse situations, it's used emotionally, it's used politically, like it has all these generative things that can come out of it, and I see it in gallery shows used just so flatly
Yeah.
as like dick jokes or like a bumper sticker or just something like so. And it always, it frustrates me that more complex uses of humor don't get made. And again, maybe it's just in gallery shows, and maybe I'm talking more about 2D work because that's mostly what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And part of that has to, of course, be about the market, I assume.
But do you think? I mean, I host an art podcast, and I've had to come to the realization that artists are not necessarily funny people.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like There is a
Yes.
tendency to sort of take your shit a little seriously. So,
Yes.
and I don't mean that disparagingly, because for the most part,
No, I'm kidding.
no, they're people are lovely, but it can be kind of hard. Like I'll have people on and they don't really like know how to give a long-winded answer. Like it feels like I have to like because they're a little, and I find that that's usually because they're used to being so controlled with how
Hmm.
they present themselves, and so it can be really hard to be on the spot and like actually just you know be dumb publicly, which I'm told like you have to be okay with if you do a podcast, right? Like I get shit wrong all the time, and if I sat there stressing like, oh, I need to cut that out, I'm like, no, fuck it, okay. Like I just did a recent one where I was like, I said Biden was responsible for the three strikes law, which is technically incorrect, but it's in spirit correct. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Truthiness, right? That's what we call that. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was happening around the same time. California did it first. It probably, it was probably maybe Kamala Harris was involved, and I don't even know the history
Yeah.
of the three strikes.
The crime bill, was that his thing? The crime bill? He had some big,
Yeah, it was the '94 crime bill that I was
yeah.
referring to, but I conflated it. But like, if I start stressing that, like, I'm like, okay, whatever. It's podcasting. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But okay, so, like, what do you? How do you use humor specifically? Like, what do you find funny? What is it that you find lacking? I mean, weirdness. I get weirdness in what sense though? Like weirdness for because I feel like there's a lot of examples of weirdness, and weirdness is a space that people are really comfortable with, but it's not necessarily funny all the time,
Hmm.
right? So I'm getting the Jim Shaw there. There's definitely some weirdness there. It's like it's absurdist, right? Almost.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
think I think that that like the idea of I'm struggling to articulate my thoughts here. Pushing humor into a sense that into a place that's not very one two simple flat footed, just an obvious like, oh, I'm going to take thing A and thing B and they're not related and I'll put them together and haha, we have a new hilarious thing.
are you
Um,
saying that some artists are prop comics?
you
Who?
did a painting with Carrot Top fairly recently in
Oh,
it.
really?
Uh, Maybe that is. Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's a quick punchline. It's a quick joke. And to
Yeah.
me, it seems like there's a lot of that and people seem to be interested in it and people seem to buy it. And it seems to be great when you scroll past it once on social media. But like, I like humor that you can kind of come back to. Like a lot of my favorite movies or TV shows or artworks, I get more from them every time I come back to them. Even when it seems like there are dumb jokes, there's enough layering or enough combining of different ideas together that it keeps things interesting.
Mm.
Uh,
So it looks like you're looking for something that's a little bit more intangible, which is where I was getting frustrated with stuff, right? Like when it feels like people don't have to look at your work. Can you imagine how frustrating that is? Like, right? And then I would just get tired of just saying the same thing because it was like a tight little pitch, right? Like to be able to be like, I have a receipt printer and it prints all of my receipts for a year and it's the self portrait and all of that shit. But the thing of it was that the actual pieces were enjoyable to look at, right? And so I felt like I started to chase a little bit more of that ambiguity and like maybe not start with the ending first. You get what I'm saying? Like sort of just like but there are things like I've done some stuff with found objects where I do like the idea of like and I feel like that deals a little bit more in the area of what we're talking about where it's like a really cynical fortune cookie. There were all these two-dimensional like flat things, right? And so the idea of working with things that like you have to sort of look at and try to interpret why they're there, and then the reason that they're there being funny. But like, so do you have any examples of your own work like this that you can give that we can see, like, what you find humorous and what you're actually speaking of? Or is this more of a general talk about how dour and serious the art world is?
I think, well, I guess so. I'm thinking about a performance I did a number of years ago, which was, it was when maybe in like 2015 when everybody was hot to trot for zombie formalism. Um, and I did this fake art history lecture where I dressed up like an art historian and was presenting the history of zombie formalism and how that led into further art movements. And it all was tied back and related to banana ecology. And it was given through like a fake university that was funded by Halliburton. And it just like it got really absurd and really weird, and it kind of layered on top of itself. And it, I don't know, again, not to like toot my own horn, like, I'm so funny. And I think
No,
Jim
but
Shaw.
it's a representation of. I mean, like, if comics talk about what they think is funny, so I don't think that it's like, I don't think it's gauche, which is why I
Yeah.
led the way by talking about my like things that. But you don't have to like actually tell me the joke, because that like then it just falls flat, which I didn't
Yeah.
do either. So it is. But what I noticed though is that we've been talking about 2D, and I find like performance is sort of where that weirdness is comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's maybe a little bit more related to like humor that we're used to seeing, right? Like maybe it is a boundary. Like, I'm just still trying to figure out how do you do funny in 2D without actually making like cartoons, right? Like but maybe that's not something that you're not okay with, or that's a
Yeah.
double negative.
Some amount of cartoonishness is okay. I'm thinking of another Jim Shaw piece where he started out with these photoreal drawings of politicians and then morphed them kind of into blobs. And then those blobs morphed into explicit pornographic images. And so it was like these politicians turning into like really grotesque porn, which was just weird. And it was beautifully done. And it was kind of narrative. I think narrative has something to do with it.
Well,
I would
painting,
even,
there is narrative in painting, so
mhm.
whereas in photography it's a little bit harder. But go ahead.
Even like Hieronymus Bosch, like the musical notes written on a butt. Like there's so much weird hilariousness in a lot of paintings. But I think it's maybe my favorite work is like slow and layered and dense and narrative. And a lot of that goes into the humor. And I think,
So the
I think
Hieronymus Bosch helps me understand it a little bit. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I think that, for a lot of artists, particularly gallery artists, like you have to have a quick turnaround time. And certainly as artists, I feel like we're all under this pressure to produce. And maybe like really getting weird with it takes just time and patience. And, even thinking about like my favorite comedic TV shows, they usually have very short seasons, because they're well done. They're like dense. They're crafted. Time is spent on them.
Yeah, yeah. The Hieronymus Bosch thing. Now I'm starting to understand the layers of it, and the fact that you're okay with cartooniness. I'm starting to get a better sense of like what you're talking about in terms of humor, and it's interesting though. Like, there are a lot of funny paintings in that sense. I was trying to understand. I feel like performance art can sometimes get a little bit too into that space of being weird for weird's sake, but it
Yes.
doesn't sound like weird for weird's sake bothers you, or does it?
I think I do prefer weird for a reason, or
what do you think are weird? Like, are there
Yeah.
things? Are there noble causes to which you can be weird?
um, I guess there's, and this is a hard thing to describe, but there's like the thing that I find is maybe that I don't like when things are just being weird is when they're weird and boring. You know, something can be so weird and it can go on for a while and you're just like checking your phone. And then it's
Mhm.
like, how is this person is like, smearing chicken blood all over and I'm bored by this, So maybe part of it is engagement with the audience. I
Yeah.
don't know. But I'm sure I see you nodding. I'm sure you know what I mean when something is
Well, I
really
live in
weird
LA.
and all right, how am I bored at this situation?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is not uncommon, definitely. Um,
It feels like an oxymoron to be boring weird. And maybe that's the thing that I'm
yeah.
finding.
Yeah, and there's definitely something of like there's definitely the making people uncomfortable weird.
Hmm.
So I've definitely seen more things that have made me laugh. And I mean I read a lot of comics, so in terms of that, so maybe that is kind of like maybe there's a hierarchical sort of snobbiness that is what sort of makes it, because I do think that some people like there is a tendency to recoil from the cartoony uh, in those spaces, right? Unless you're talking to about like Lichtenstein, and he's like not even really making jokes. He's actually being a little bit precious with it, which I'm not saying that in a pejorative, but he's
Hmm.
like, this stuff is valid, man. Like I do every time I read comics when I go to sleep. So, what do you draw from then in terms of like the subject matter?
I draw from a lot of things. My work is usually looking at history and trying to kind of recombine lots of different icons and images in weird and funny ways. I also spend a ton of time on the internet, and I guess maybe part of my craving for weirdness and for humor is that I feel like I see things on TikTok every day that are so much more bizarre and insane and creative and resonant than many of the gallery shows that I go to. And
Who are your best follows?
my favorite,
Yeah.
um,
You don't
there's
have to
certain
plug
there's
someone.
what.
You don't have to plug someone if you don't want to.
Someone.
You know,
Mostly what I like about TikTok is that
is
unlike a
that
lot of
Carrot Top is on it and you get to.
no, his Instagram though is hilarious. But the thing about
Really?
TikTok is you really get to see random accounts all the time. It's not like Instagram where you're only seeing the people you follow.
Yeah.
Like you just get bombarded with the weirdest stuff all the time. And it's really amazing. But maybe that just sets too high a bar. Like I just have access to too much funny, weird content 24/7.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Maybe TikTok is ruining me.
I'm trying to think, is there like funny photography? There has to be, right?
I mean, I think like David LaChapelle would be someone
You know
who's
what's funny? I didn't know he wasn't black until like Rakeem Cunningham told me recently, and he said he was like I didn't know either. He sent me a picture, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this?" I had forgotten the conversation. I was like, "Who is this?" And he goes, "That's David David LaChapelle," and we just lost it. But it's fucking hilarious, dude. So, I mean, you think he's funny? I'm trying to think. Okay, he's absurd a little bit, and I haven't seen anything recent. I saw him like, you know, a show of his when I was younger, and I didn't really follow his work too closely after that.
I haven't followed his work too closely, but there's some of the work is really funny. Some of it is just very like, uh, editorial, very fashiony. So it's definitely runs a gamut.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so it's interesting because I feel like we're in different places in terms of humor, and I don't disagree with, like, I mean, I'm not like too good for your take on it, but I think that it's like mine is a little bit more in the conceptual realm, right? Whereas like I'm trying to keep a little bit of that humor where you get the humor from the piece instead of from the description of it, or like from the experience of looking at the piece and thinking about and reflecting on it. Whereas it seems like there's maybe something a little bit more literal in what you're looking for. Does that seem like in terms of, because we're talking about narrative form, right? And so, or at least to my mind, I kind of think of that in that sense. Is that or is that a weird way of thinking about it from your standpoint?
Yeah, I guess literal is the thing that maybe I would have a question about. I think I definitely the experience of the work is important to me with humor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you were saying, I think that, yeah, I'm having trouble. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble articulating. I have a very brutal teaching schedule this semester, and we
No,
just
you're totally
started.
fine.
A little bit
This isn't a
fried.
I hate to keep pushing it. It's just this is an ambiguous space, so I'm just trying to figure out what it is, and the space. You're not expected to have like a precise answer for your topic. I think it's
There's
an interesting conversation. Like for me, the idea, what I mean about literal, is like is not like is that is I'm associating literal with the like that it is literally on the page, right? You could argue that like you know a fortune cookie that says never forget a friend especially if he owes you is like cynical, and it is also literal, but the humor, what's funny about it is not necessarily, or what I find funny about it is not necessarily what's spelled out, right? It's I find it is like something that is representative of an American attitude for an American product that is like pretending to be something else, but it's just like the idea of like of that being Eastern wisdom when it's like straight up raw capitalism. That's hilarious to me, right? And so
Yes.
that's the space that I like to fuck around with. That's like what I find funny, right? And then so there's like there's
I
in
guess
that go ahead.
that I think something that maybe we're getting towards is a layered experience,
Yeah.
because like a painting of a dick joke or something that's very literal. There's no You don't dig in that, and that doesn't make you think about these big questions about what does it mean to be a Western capitalist, what does a fortune cookie mean, like,
Yeah.
I think a joke that makes you think, or a joke that makes you recognize a bunch of different ways that it's interconnected in the world is part of what I think I'm looking for.
Okay. So then there is like I guess what I would describe that as being something that is there's like a required knowledge set to have a reading, right? Because someone else could just read that cookie and be like, yeah, of course. Right? So like
Yes, but that's maybe the layering of it, because I think even if you had no knowledge about the history of Chinese food in America or whatever, you would still see that and be like, that's funny and weird. Like, you would still
yeah.
maybe chuckle, but then you
Yeah.
can have a more like layered understanding of it if you have additional context.
So
Um,
then, okay, let's go back to like, let's go straight up, like the Feast of Herod. Are you familiar with the painting? I mean, with the theme, it's basically it's like a Renaissance, because there's a lot of funny shit in Renaissance painting,
yeah.
and so Feast of Herod is basically where I think someone just gets decapitated. I forget exactly the fucking details
Okay, I'm pulling up an image here just so that I have something
to look
to
at. Yeah,
that. Yes.
here, let me do that as well. Of Herrod. And so this is a theme that a lot of different people painted, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
many versions of this. It's also like there are a bunch of these themes that people would paint. They would paint the Annunciations and all of that. But there's some where the fucking paintings are so goofy. Right? So that I think is different than what we're talking about. We're not just talking about like, oh, something is overtly painted awkwardly to make a commentary on the person, right? Like, but like there's maybe something thematically going on as well that goes beyond. So it's not just cartoony, like
Yes.
laying things out in relation to each other. Like this person's looking at, like, I mean, I know you're really into memes, but it's like there is a simplicity to sort of Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man, right? And like even without text, that image is kind of funny.
Yeah. Yes. And then you add text, and then you can add a situation where you have, multiple Spider-Men pointing at each other, and then you can layer that spider meme into like a Venn diagram meme, like that kind of like
So
iterative.
you want art to be a little bit more meme-like. Is that fair?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't. I think, but I get what you're saying, and I think that that's an interesting thing because I feel like meme is like a egalitarian art form. Anybody can fucking do it. Anybody can, because you don't have to be able to draw. You can take an image. You don't even have to find the image. You can take an image that everybody fucking uses and just put your own spin on it. You've done your own Annunciation or your own Feast of Herod now. You've done your own blah 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 meme, right? Like, so it's an interesting format. I have been holding off. I've thought about this a lot, but I didn't want to like guide the conversation. But like Zebra Zorb, Deborah is like a weird and funny artist, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah. And one of the things when I had her on the show that I talked to her about is that what like she was like, oh, they're just silly. They're not like, and we were talking about the horror, and I was like, no, dude, if that shit came out of a womb, it would be fucking terrifying. And that is like where the dark layered humor comes in. It's like, oh, this is cute. These are ceramics and they're kitsch and blah, blah, blah. But like all of a sudden you're turning these into this like, they're not abstractions because you get what I'm saying? Even though it's like, it's too representational of a starting point to call it really full abstraction, right? So it's like it's interesting how something like that can kind of just put you through a loop. So any thoughts on like any pieces, particular examples that you can give me of like things that make you think of this kind of complexity? Or is it, or are they all just they just make you think about like how horrible nature can be to people and creatures?
I'm sorry. Are you talking about Deborah's work in particular?
Yeah, Deborah's work or branching off from there?
Yeah.
I'm using that as an example to add to the melting pot of ideas that we've been throwing in to try to define what this humor conversation is about.
Totally. I loved, she had a show at Track 16 in LA maybe 2 years ago. And she took the same specific ceramic figurines of rabbits and I think bought just hundreds of them and made like kind of a full installation of them just in a bazillion different positions and iterations. And it really became, really like an installation. And then of course, you think about like rabbits reproducing like crazy, which increases any kind of mutation potential. And that was probably like my favorite work piece of hers that I've seen. I felt like it just really, it took this weird, bizarre thing that she's doing. And then it like, was building on itself and becoming this kind of crazy installation. I'm definitely a maximalist. And I think maybe that comes into
what's a maximalist?
The opposite of a minimalist. I like a lot of stuff, so much stuff.
Oh, okay.
Things, items, explosions.
So your paintings are like action movies with humor?
Um,
Are we talking Fast and Furious franchise right now?
yeah, I mean, well, I guess I'm thinking of maximal images, not maximal sequels, if that's what you're I'm kidding.
Well,
I love
actually, it's actually pretty interesting because in those movies, now that I think about it, there is a humor to how fucking ridiculous things happen. That you know how ridiculous the set pieces are, the fact that they don't lose fights, the fact that like there are these bizarre rules that came about through negotiation with Vin Diesel and all the actors that wanted to like keep their like set boundaries and make sure that the franchise wasn't taken away from him by The Rock. Like I think that at the end of one of the Fast and Furious movies, they put the preview for like they put a little like end scene with Hobbs and Shaw, and he was like, "Get that shit out of there." They got their own movie already. Fuck you, get it out of there, right? So like, but by that means of negotiation, we have this fucking movie, this universe of ridiculous stunts of things that people could never fucking pull off, right? Like, and they're all casual. I heard Adam Scott once say on a podcast that like there's a stunt where that he pulls off and like this guy runs off of a bus that's falling off of a cliff. He runs off, and then a car comes, and it swings. It does like a slide. And it drifts, and he grabs onto the spoiler, and then and she saves it like that. And Adam Scott was like, "Yeah, if that happens in real life, you would never stop talking about it. Like the whole rest of the day, all you would do is fucking just be like, did you see that? Did you see that?" But yeah.
there was a scene, I'm not sure which one. I'm not a Fast and the Furious connoisseur. I'm sorry, I don't have all the deets, but there was one where they were on a runway with a plane that was about to take off. And the scene went on for minutes and minutes and minutes. And they were driving next to the plane and they were trying to get on or off the plane. And I remember people online breaking it down based on the speed of a plane and coming up with like this runway would have to be 25 miles long. Like the complete absurdity of something like that, which upon like closer inspection just becomes so utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And
that's weird. That falls under weird.
I think using that lens to look at something that we're not like supposed to look at critically and looking at it critically and revealing how utterly bizarre, that invisible frame that we're supposed to pretend isn't there is particularly funny to me. And I think the internet is particularly good at doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's like same thing with music and everything. Like you can make music now with fucking nothing, right? I think that like there's still prohibitive costs to computers and stuff, but the fact that you can get a phone and now you can have Adobe products on your phone and you can sync them up with your fucking shit. Like it's insane how like you can start your own little media empire with just a subscription. Because before you had to steal, like when I was a kid, I don't know how old you are. You used to have to steal it. The
Yes.
Photoshops.
My first Creative Suite subscription was like, we a bunch of friends had passed around some bootleg, serial numbers that we were using. Yeah. Somebody had a Word doc and you would go down and try all the different serial numbers. Yeah.
Oh man, the era of BitTorrenting was
classy in Missouri, just to let everyone know,
All right. So then cool. Well, is there any thoughts that you have on the topic as we're wrapping up? Like, because it is a hard thing to sort of pin down, and I appreciate us sitting down. I appreciate both of us, myself included, sitting down and trying to figure.
Way to go! I said, "Good job, us! Way to go! High five!"
But it's interesting to think about that because I do take humor seriously. I mean, I want to have fun when I make art, like I've never been into the sort of like morose, like I've definitely had depression issues in my life, But in terms of like making artwork, I was never like a Francis Bacon or, like somebody that was like, oh my God, my soul is so like I was never goth about it. Goth. Although I did have a phase where I was a grunge kid, but I would dress goth to go to goth clubs with friends that were like goth all the time. I don't know.
Just to fit in, slide under the radar there a little bit.
Yeah. And then I started to become a bit of a raver. That was more my music scene. I used to listen to jungle music and stuff. What were you like? Are you a millennial?
I am a millennial, yeah. I definitely was kind of an emo kid in high school. Um, yeah, I was very quiet in high school. I was very nerdy. I definitely, came into my own much later on. I was like a weird arty kid, I
Hmm.
guess. In
Bookwormy?
college, oh, sorry, what?
Bookwormy?
Yeah, I was very smart, very serious. I think maybe that's where some of my humor. I always had a good sense of humor, but I took myself too seriously, I think, for a long time. And definitely deciding to become an artist um, was something I did because it was fun and because I loved it and because I could make a lot of jokes. It's not.
Yeah.
I'm not saving someone's life. I'm not going into surgery right now to work on someone's brain. I think that art is vitally important in so many ways, but I also don't think that we have to take ourselves so seriously or act like, you know.
Well, I don't even know how people that take it that seriously show up to the page. Like if you gotta fucking go to that dark place to make artwork, like, oh god damn, I feel sorry for you. Like that's not to say that sometimes I don't make projects that are not tedious. Like tedious I can do, but like sad and mopey. Ugh. It's like it's hard enough to fucking get out of that space. So I'm with you. I think that we probably agree overall on the topic of humor, which agreement is not usually what happens here. I disagree with everybody, and I tell them to go fuck themselves. No, I don't.
I think too, I mean, for me, I am a very sad, mopey, depressed person in a lot of ways, but I use humor to deal with that. Like I would rather laugh than cry. And if I have to choose, I'm going to lean into a way of dealing with these things that's humorous or that's funny.
I forget what comedian it was, but back when I was younger, he had a joke about how like why he listens to pop and Rihanna and like Madonna and all this that stuff is just because it's like life is fucking miserable. you
Yeah.
know, I think the premise of the joke was that he was gay and this was back when being gay wasn't that cool, so his life was a little bit hard growing up. So he was like, that's why I don't listen to fucking Elliott Smith and shit like that, which makes sense. I can like if life sucks, why do you want to like dwell on that? But all right, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have anything that you want to plug? Anything that? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say,
Instagram.
oh yeah, follow me on the gram. I post a lot of really dumb, funny memes in my stories. If you reach out to me and become my close friend, you'll see the real spicy stuff because I do have to stay employed, so I try not to post the most extreme memes for public consumption and or my
Oh, okay.
students.
So there's a firewall here.
Yeah, there's a secret menu, the animal style,
So
whatever.
the if you want to see her content that would get her canceled is
A little bit. Yeah, it gets a little
all
spicy.
right. And then do you have a website that people can check out?
I do. It's my name, ROSEBRICCETTI.com.
And it's just your name with an underscore in between both names, right? For the Instagram? No, it's just one word.
Oh, just my name. Just my name. Yep.
Okay.
No other characters, just the
No other character.
letters.
All right.
Mhm.
And we are at What's My Thesis. I'm at Javier Proenza, and you guys can catch us next week. Thank you for listening. And thank you for coming on the show. Let me just
Thanks for having me.
What did you think of our conversation? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our merch store. Special thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, go to patreon.com/whatsmythesis. All the links are in the description below.